Hello. Hi guys, thank you all for turning out on a cold Friday evening. I'd like to welcome you all to a live Real Horror Show podcast recording. I'm Mark Sheridan, writer and director of Crone Wood. To the left of me I have Zoe Kavanagh, who is the writer and director of Taryn Barker Demon Hunter, or Demon Hunter depending which video on demand site you're on. We've got David Turpin, who is the writer of The Lodgers, which is an upcoming horror film that's getting great reviews. I think it premiered at Toronto, is that right? And yeah, that's going to be a big one to watch out for. And then obviously we've got Conor McMahon, the infamous Conor McMahon, probably directed more Irish horror films than anyone else in this country. Director of Dead Meat, Stitches, The Disturbed, we might have a chat about, and From the Dark. Hi Conor.
Hello.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to have a bit of a chat here first of all, and then we can ask you guys if there's any questions. You're more than welcome to join in. And then afterwards we're going to have our screening. We'll probably break for about 10 minutes, and if anyone wants to go out and buy a few beers or anything, they're more than welcome to. But just to start off, I think we may as well start with Zoe here on my left. Do you want to just briefly talk about why you love horror, and then can you name a couple of your favorite horrors?
Yeah, why I love horror. I think what's great about horror is like not only the thrill of being, scared or like invested in characters only for things to be lashed away from them, but I mean, I love going back to even Gothic horror with Bram Stoker's Dracula and the imagination that you get within that, the mythology that is built, the fantasy, dark fantasy that's within those stories. But then usually you have like psychological elements to certain other aspects of horror. There's different ways. I mean, you look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that was probably the first found footage film, one of the first. And when you sit down and watch it, you feel like if the characters are decent enough, you feel like you're there with them. And so, I mean, you're terrified, and you just you want to see what happens, and there's that moment where I know Texas Chainsaw has no gore in it, but the sequels do.
Did you call it a found footage film?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of like the illusion of a found footage film because it's shot like a documentary because they don't have any lights.
Right.
So it's not really a found footage, but
Okay,
I know
yeah,
Cannibal
I just wanted to clarify.
Cannibal Holocaust.
We're already fighting folks and haven't even had a beer.
You look at films like Last Exorcism, and you look at all those modern ones. They class them as found footage films, but they're not. But they just have that the documentary cinematography.
The rawness,
yeah. So your brain makes you think it's a bit more real or gritty, and then you have you get into more psychological horror stuff like Jacob's Ladder, or where you're invested to go into the psyche and the mind of a character, and you get morality tales, like Tales from the Crypt or The Outer Limits. I think the stories I like to explore. I guess my favorite genres in horror would be, I do like slasher, I do like psychological horror, and I do like fantasy horror. You're saying, what the hell am I talking about? Right, I suppose.
So you like all horror?
No, I do like. Yeah, okay, I do like comedy horror. One of my favorite. Okay, all right. I'll shut up. Name my favorites. Okay.
Just off the top of your head.
Okay, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Warriors. I would name Candyman. I'd put that on my list. I would say maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Alien, and Return of the Living Dead.
Oh, good call.
It's really funny.
Okay, David, so
What do I love about horror?
yeah, well, what attracted you to horror, I guess? Are you a big horror fan, or just does it happen to be your first film as a horror?
Oh no, I am. I guess I think it's I think horror and fantasy and science fiction and those kind of genres are interesting because they give us a vocabulary to talk about things that are difficult to talk about, like particularly sex, I suppose. Don't know about everyone else. I find sex incredibly difficult to talk about, and horror kind of gives us a language to talk about things that are forbidden or things that are wrong, like wrong things, and so I just love. I mean, God, if I had to think of a horror film that I I love. I mean, the first film that I can recall ever seeing was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the thrill of how horrifying it is, and those wonderful scenes where the witch goes into the basement of the castle and there's a skeleton it's in a cage and it's reaching for a jug of water and it's like an inch out of the way, and the sheer cruelty and horror of that just thrilled me as a 4-year-old or whatever. And that's stayed with me. And so I mean, I guess kind of grown-up horror films, I love Cat People. Well, I was going to say the 1944 one. I also love the weird 1981 one with all the Giorgio Moroder music and the bestiality, and so it's great. That kind of thing.
Conor.
Someone said recently, we're all creating horror films in our heads, so you might as well get paid for it, which I think is sort of true. I mean, everybody's creating these awful horrors about their lives and what's going on, so you might as well turn it into movies. But I mean, for me, originally it probably came as I started making horror films before I even watched a lot of horror films. So it was kind of it wasn't so we had a video camera when I was at home, so we used to make all kinds of films. And I think we just had more fun killing each other in films. And people seemed to respond to them more whenever we made horrors. So at the time I was watching, we'd make gangster movies and whatever we were watching. But so it was more for making horrors. I was like, I should watch more of these. I mean, my earliest horror memory was a Thriller, watching Thriller, and then I think seeing Jaws. They were the two I saw when I was young, and then the third was RoboCop, which I was quite young. But the only reason I saw it because my mother wouldn't let us watch horror films. But my uncle said, "Oh, it's just like the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz." and I remember rewinding. There's a scene where a guy gets kneecapped, and I remember being about 12 or something and rewinding that scene and my family thinking that was really weird for doing that. But I think they were my early sort of memories of horror.
I do remember, actually, I did the same thing as a kid. I think it was 12, Nightmare on Elm Street, when Johnny Depp gets pulled through the bed and gets milkshaked. I just kept rewinding at the fountain coming out of the bed. I was like, what happened in that bed?
Well, is that something then that all of you have come up against, though, where, there is a tendency to think that people who really love horror films, I think it's probably fair to say that maybe most people in this room, but certainly the four of us here, have a concentrated love of the genre. Is that something you've had to fight against, where when you tell people you love horror films, is it seen as an embarrassment, or is it, something you don't give a shit about what people think about?
I've never minded being regarded as a pervert. I think the reason that we go to the movies is to see things that we're not allowed to do. So I think it's a natural and healthy thing to want to see,
But it is, because actually it's interesting to say, call it be seen as a pervert, but is it a perversion to enjoy watching these things? Because I don't think so, but I understand that it's portrayed as that way, because I kind of agree with what you were saying earlier on, David, where it was horror is an incredible way of using this different vocabulary, because we can use things on a slightly heightened level, but we can talk about very real challenges that people have. It's a safer bubble, because people kind of process it differently. If it was a kitchen sink drama, Texas Chainsaw Massacre with just 3 people sitting around a table complaining about life wouldn't have been quite as exciting.
I think there's a divide, because I think in general, it's okay to say you're into horror movies, but there is certainly, if you go into the filmmaking side of things, there is to a degree a little bit of I suppose in Ireland there's a sense if you make a horror that you can't just make it for the laugh and just chop a load of people up or whatever. Like there was a guy I know was in Los Angeles, and he pitched, I'm just going to kill 5 people in ways you've never seen before, and they were like, give him the money, and they gave him, and they fun. You can't do that in Ireland.
No.
There's a sense where you've, so I don't know. There's sort of the industry and how you sort of engage and get funding to make horror films here, where you sometimes can't kind of pitch it as complete entertainment. I think I could be wrong there.
It's kind of the Irish conservative nature that's.
You have to justify why you want to have this entertainment.
Yeah. Which is maybe you do have to justify chopping a lot of people up.
I think there's a time and place for everything, because it's funny when you talk about horror films. It's one of those I don't know any other genre where it's broken down into so many other things. You've got our zombies, you've got vampires, you've got horror comedies, you've got comedy horrors if you want to get really specific. Yeah, you got your sci-fi horror. Like, we're quite comfortable breaking it down into all these different worlds, and it's okay because some of them are just fun. Like, slasher films generally are about just kind of enjoying in a weird way, watching like 10 people being killed off. While there's other ones which have a much, like say the Romero zombie films, are much more kind of political subtext to them and social commentary. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with either of those. Like, it always feels a bit weird to compare the two. Like, if I was to try and challenge you, like, is Dawn of the Dead better than Evil Dead 2? I don't know why we have to have that conversation. They're both amazing. Yeah. You know, like, would you, like, David, when you were, because The Lodgers, we haven't seen it yet, but I get it's a period horror film.
Yeah.
Do you want to actually give us a little introduction to it?
Should have this off by now, but I don't. It's a little bit like, I guess it's like a cross between The Turn of the Screw and The Cement Garden. So it's a kind of
Which was The Innocents was the movie.
The Innocents was the movie of The Turn of the Screw, yeah, and then The Others is kind of a riff on it, if you like. It's about a twin brother and sister who live in a creepy mansion in 1920 Ireland, and all the terrible things that emanate from their creepy mansion. It's going to say that on the poster.
And would I be right in guessing that this is because, like you say, in the tone of The Innocents and everything, this is going back much more to the more subtle kind of creeping dread, unnerving horror as opposed to overt violence and aggressiveness, or like, you know, jump scares, or are we...
I don't think it's wildly violent. I suppose what it emerges from most is a sort of, I mean, I don't know to what degree this is considered a horror tradition, but this sort of gothic romance. I remember when I was little and we used to go to the library on the weekends, my mum would take us to the library, and there were always these great paperbacks, and they always had a woman in a nightdress fleeing a castle in a storm, holding a candelabra, and the candles always stayed lighted in the storm. And that kind of thing always fascinated me, and I suppose it comes from that. I mean, I would hope it's maybe a little less ridiculous than the lighted candelabra and storm genre, but it's that kind of space.
So does your love of horror then kind of come a bit more from reading over watching films, or would it be?
It's both. I mean, I see horror as a film genre much more than a literary thing. I think you have to see it, and it's sort of visceral, and it has to sort of explode in your face, as it were, and literature doesn't really do that. I don't understand, you know, these kind of like Stephen King books and stuff where it's like a phone book. I don't know how you can stay in that space for the time it takes to read 1,000 pages. Or
audiobooks.
Actually, just out of interest with the crowd in general, like, I'll do two shows of hands. Is like, for people who prefer their horrors to be fun and enjoyable, can we get hands in the air? And the other option, I suppose I'll say, is it more violent and disturbing. So, fun and enjoyable, and violent and disturbing. And the people in the middle, what's wrong with you? Go on, tell us, like, what kind of horrors do you enjoy? Not so scary. No, it's just funny because, like, you like that or don't? Yeah, that kind of level. So, like, less kind of on-screen violence and more kind of just a creepy story.
Yeah.
I kind of, yeah, like, I enjoy both kinds, but I do think the ones that kind of get under your skin last longer. So, like, the really violent films will get you in that moment. It's disgusting. You'll want to turn away. You'll be horrified. But the stuff that really tends to stick with you and bother you is more the story and that kind of twisted reality. Question for the rest of you guys then, like, is there such thing as going too far in horror? Like, where is that line, and who decides what that line is?
A Serbian film. I like it.
No, that's, like, there is. Like, in my opinion, like, I mean, you look at Friday the 13th, you look at Nightmare on Elm Street, you look at Hellraiser. Okay, firstly, Friday the 13th and the slasher films of the 80s. Everyone, all the teenagers had like a problem that they were being killed off. It was kind of like this conservative Reagan era type politics. You know, they were having sex, they're dead. They're taking drugs, they were dead. Or whatever else they were doing. You were a stoner. Yeah, that's drugs. Yeah, you're dead. But like whatever other stereotypes you are, you're being killed. But then the killer would get his comeuppance by the innocent girl at the end, you know, the final girl as they would call it. Then you would get films like Saw, where in Saw you had a moralistic serial killer who would entrap criminals and people that have done a lot of bad in their life to kind of escape death traps as a sort of rehab to kind of find a new lease on life. So all these films, like even and Hellraiser, for example, Pinhead isn't really an evil guy. He's coming over saying, "You've been a bad person. You've done all these things in your life, and I'm taking you to hell." You know, so in a sense, all these films kind of teach you these sort of moralistic lessons, and it's usually interesting. You know, whatever horror films they are, they always have something like, but like you can have sometimes a film like a Serbian film or some other films that they'll push too far.
Have people here seen a Serbian film?
It's
not really recommended unless you're really
banned in this country. Yeah. It's, but like it was kind of like, I think it came through. It was kind of birthed out of the success of Saw and Hostel. But sure, even you look at Hostel, for example. So all these foreigners are going to Eastern Europe and they're being tortured by the rich who bid for their bodies. But in each Hostel film, the hero gets their revenge. So the audience feels kind of like somewhat satisfied, even though we're setting up. It'll always go on. The bidding will always go on, and the evil will always be there. You know. So I mean, usually 90% of horror films.
They do, yeah. Actually, no. Because like the moral thing is a good thing to talk about, and I want to get back to you guys on the question. But just on the moral thing, though, like I think. I like a film that has a good moral message and that works at the end. It's very rewarding. The only danger, I think, in some horror films, say a Serbian movie, but then even if we look at some of the rape revenge films as well, is there is kind of it's a cheap exploitation film about watching, say, the brutalization of a woman for say, 80 minutes, or even if it was the first half an hour, and then she gets her revenge later on. And the idea is that it was fine to enjoy this very violent scene earlier on because they got their comeuppance afterwards, but depending on the film, I don't always believe that you know.
See, it depends on the movie. Like, if you take Martyrs, for example, which I love. You hated this.
Did you? I love Martyrs. I think it's one of the greatest.
But like,
the French one.
See, I don't know. It's like often I would say you can disagree with me in a second, but a lot of the time when people kind of get offended by it, like, okay, I really don't want to be the person, like, you know, behind a Serbian film. Like, I mean, I watched it. But the only thing I'll say about it is, and it goes with a lot of other stuff, it's like the way, often it's because the film is well made, you know, like it's not like it was like a terribly exploitative, badly made kind of movie. Like it kind of, the reason it kind of shocked people is kind of because they knew what they were doing and they executed it, however depraved, but they executed the depravity quite well.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I don't know quite what I'm saying, but it's kind of like, you know, it's there's a sense that where the film is dismissed, like the people didn't know what they were doing and they just want to be exploitive. Whereas often it's like, I mean, I don't know if there's quite a parallel, but you know the way Reservoir Dogs, people say, oh, it's such a violent movie.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's still not that much violence in the film, it just happens to be very well done.
It's kind of funny as well.
Yeah, so like for me, I don't know, I really liked Martyrs. I mean, Martyrs is a very violent film, but I liked it.
But
why did you not like it?
Okay, well, Martyrs. I don't think that it is necessarily possible for films to go too far. I mean, a film I really like is Possession.
Oh, that's a great film, yeah.
This little girl, I can't say his name, Polish filmmaker from early 1980s. But there's this scene with Isabella Gianni where she goes crazy in the subway, really famous scene, and it goes on and on and on and on. And it is everybody's idea of too far, but it's so cathartic. The fact that she did that, the fact that they simply let the camera roll and we see it, and it's beyond all barriers of good taste, and it's magnificent. Martyrs.
For anyone actually, sorry, just because so like on Possession, we're talking about this is like probably a 6-minute scene. I would imagine the subway of 10 minutes, is it? Of the main actress literally just completely losing it. I think is fair to say, and it develops from there. So it's quite intense because there's no kind of cutaway or relief.
Not as bad as Irreversible.
No, that's another day's conversation.
But Irreversible is copying it, I guess. But it's the opposite. I mean, how often do you get to see a woman express that kind of rage in a film in a way that's not within, some kind of rape revenge?
Yeah.
But I just, there's certain movies that's like Martyrs, there's Hostel, and it's a bunch of teenagers getting tortured, and people go, oh, well, it's really a commentary. Hostel is really a commentary on the relationship between Americans and Europeans, and it's like, well, if you're really interested in that, you can read Washington Square or The Portrait of a Lady or something. I'm not for a moment convinced that people are going to Hostel because they want to see a commentary on the relationship.
Agreed, yeah.
And also, I thought Martyrs was a gross...
It is.
Series of scenes of young women being tortured, beaten. Eventually she's flayed alive, I think. Spoiler alert. And I'm not convinced for a minute by this flimsy wafer of philosophical bullshit that they layer into the film. This stupid Kubrickian.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen Martyrs, sorry, just before you get out, just to introduce. So Martyrs is a French horror film. The French went through an extreme horror phase, probably in the early 2000s, I think, starting kind of Switchblade romance and then kind of moving on from there. But Martyrs is probably the most hardcore, but maybe inside nowadays. But it involves two girls basically turn up at a family home, and she shoots one of the kids, and violence ensues from there, and it kind of leads into, it twists around halfway, and actually I totally agree with your argument, actually, because I quite like the film. I think it's a very well-made film, but I agree with you that it's a bullshit notion at the end to try and tie it all together.
At the same time, right, okay, so Martyrs kind of opens with a kind of Joseph Fritzl situation where this kid is being tortured, but hidden, from everyone else, and she's just living in, solitude by this family. And so the whole thing has a grim, mean-spirited feel throughout the whole film. But the ending, the only bit she gets of empowerment, she doesn't tell them what she saw, and that's kind of it doesn't just end on hopelessness, but it's still a grim experience, and I think a lot of French cinema kind of pushed it that way,
Yeah, but it's my question for that is like the rape revenge ones, though. It's at the end they give us a reason for why. They give you a justification at the end, but does that actually really excuse what they've shown? And I think that's a hard one in horror films. And I agree with you because actually it's very rough. Martyrs is a very tough film. And I do think it's there to sensationalize and enjoy itself.
Well, ultimately, it's about the idea that one can pursue a visionary experience through extreme violence.
The only way to find God is true.
And there's this part in the movie where somebody goes, oh, and of course young women are most susceptible to it. And that's never really explained. It just seems to be an excuse to get the beautiful actresses into their underwear and torment them for 2 hours. But there were, things came out of that French, that wave of extreme French films that were really fascinating. I love Claire Denis' film Trouble Every Day, which is Beatrice Stahl plays a cannibal, and it's incredibly disturbing, and it's sexy, and Vincent Gallo is in it as well. So of course it's going to be insane. But Claire Denis is a real filmmaker, and I don't think Martyrs is the word. I think Martyrs is like a very long music video.
Do you put Martyrs in the same world as Hostel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only difference with Hostel, I guess, is there's a bit more comedy. It's a bit more lighthearted with the
See, that disturbs me more, actually, because I think they're actually making more light. I don't know why. I find that kind of...
My last comment on Martyrs, to just...
We're still on
last word. I'll tell you the one thing I liked about Martyrs was that it's rare to watch a horror film where you don't really know where you are in the film. And it's because of the structure of that film. That normally you watch a horror film, and whether it's people move into a house, spooky things, or whatever it might be, you're kind of orientated a lot of the time about what to expect and what's going to come up. Martyrs was the first film I'd seen in a long time that kind of knocked me off guard. Yeah. And as I was watching it, I just didn't know where I was or what was going to happen or what was going to come at me. And I think it was that sense that it threw me off, that I hadn't seen in a while, that I liked about it.
Yeah, when that screened at the Horathon, it was one of the few times I've seen a film there. I think Charlie's Family would have been, it's now the Manson Family on DVD, but where people actually left silence afterwards, which is pretty rare because, like, you know, the Marathon audience, people quite enjoy themselves and everything, but it really did catch people off guard and the brutality of it. But like, then to touch on where you were going with it, David, then like, what about the representation of, say, women in horror films? And again, it's not so much about bashing older films where people had different attitudes over different times, but what about the responsibility of nowadays? Like, The Lodgers is a female lead, am I correct? Is that something that was on your mind when you were writing it? Or do you think just the type of personality you are that you wouldn't have to worry about writing an exploitative type film?
I don't know. I always think of horror as a woman's genre, and I kind of find it weird when you see horror films with a male lead, and I don't know why. It's just when I think back to all the ones that I've enjoyed, be it Cat People, but also, you know, Halloween is a female lead, Alien, all of these things. For some prime reason, I guess it's more thrilling, and I don't know if it's because we live in a misogynist culture, we perceive the odds being stacked against women more anyway. So to see a woman sort of in the, you know, in those kind of roles is more thrilling to us. But I just, it's always a sort of computation in my head that you can make a horror film without a female lead. It doesn't really occur to me.
I do remember though, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2. They tried to do things differently.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, everyone hated Nightmare 2 when it came out. But when you look at Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, now it's actually a very clever social commentary on the time of, you know, coming out, like, in the 80s. I mean, the actor at the time, you know, he's gay, Mark Patton, and he was, like, afraid of that. In fact, shortly after that, he quit acting for years. But, like, that film kind of has so much subtext in it. You know, you have this character that sleepwalks to a bar, and then you have like him being whipped in the showers. But then you also have him. The only way to defeat Freddy is through this, like, his girlfriend. Actually, there's this one scene with his girlfriend where she's like about to have sex with him at a beer garden area, and he doesn't want to do it, and he runs over to his best friend Rod's place. And he says, yo, there's someone trying to get inside of me. And, you know, it's kind of like, I suppose you could say it's a Top Gun of horror films in that sense. But the film is quite clever. I know. Like, but there's the interesting thing is, right, some text came to the forefront. At the end, Freddy possesses him. And Freddy's like the stray, possesses him. And his girlfriend kisses him. And it's kind of like, oh, he needs to conform to society. And it's so interesting when you look at Nightmare on Elm Street 2 in that sense that, like, you know, trying to find your identity, trying to be who you are, and there's this evil that the world sees what you are as evil, and I think Freddy's manipulated in such a way in that film as that way. So sometimes horror films have an interesting angle on touching on subjects, and particularly at that time, like, I mean, you know, you have these elements that can be subtext, but, you know, maybe you can look at it in more and find more meaning in a horror film. And
it was AIDS era as well.
Yeah.
We tend to forget about that, as is The Fly as well.
Absolutely.
You watch I always see I know that David Cronenberg has disagreed with this, but I see The Fly as absolutely about AIDS and the fact that it's the story of this man who has this degenerative disease, people won't touch him, all the things that happen to people with AIDS, and the romance that the Gina Davis character endures with him and stays with him to the point that it becomes impossible for her to do so. I think, and I also love Nightmare on Elm Street too.
Yeah.
But the thing is, his girlfriend, she really looks like Meryl Streep.
She does actually.
And for years I thought it was her. I thought this was her embarrassing early role, but no, it's somebody else.
But it's a very clever film that actually holds up better now than maybe when it was back then. You know, it was kind of ahead of its time.
Conor, what about you? Like, do you think the film's like moral responsibility, whether it's with female characters, but actually just in general, like in your films, do you feel, because you do tend to have, whether it's your intention or not, but there is like a moral in your films, but like, is that important, or is it just sort of something it's part of the story?
Oh God.
Do your films make people a better person?
Like, honestly, some of my early films, it wouldn't occur to me in the sense of, you know, the ideas you get about films It's like, I mean, and generally my films are pretty light because, I mean, it's a comedy horror, so it's like, if I'm making a zombie film about mad cows infecting humans, I'm not too concerned about my moral responsibility as such, you know, so in a sense, that hasn't really been a big issue in the stuff that I've done, because it tends to, I guess, lean into more comedy horror, or I don't know if that's answering the question.
But what about actually do you want to talk about one of the new films that you're working on? Because that touches on an area that could be seen as politically incorrect, or depending on how you handle the thing. Do you want to talk about it and say...
I don't know what you're referring to.
The vampires...
Oh, junkie vampires?
Yeah.
Oh, like... Do I have a moral responsibility?
Well, no, because like you're dealing... Go on, give the basic picture over it.
Well, okay, well... This is one project. It's basically, well, Junkie Vampires kind of says it. It's a vampire movie where the vampire's junkie, but and it's a comedy. I think, I mean, what I'm dealing with is kind of, I guess the vampires is an analogy, but it's kind of about kind of narcissistic people, or people who are kind of. What would you call it? Like energy vampires. People, I mean, that's the analogy. So it's less about junkies. I mean, the junkie kind of idea, I mean, originally it was going to be called A Junkie Vampire in Dublin, because I thought it would be a take on An American Werewolf in London. But then I was told I can't use the word junkie in a title, probably, you know, for good reason. So in a way, I mean, just speaking openly about it, it's a tricky thing when you are making a comedy about that, because you're kind of towing the line with a subject that is quite serious, and you want to make a comedy out of it. So really, for me, the film, it's not really about junkies in that sense. It's more about vampiric type people. You know, the story is really about two brothers, and one of them is just a user. It's basically a user and someone who's been used, and the story is about not so much that the user is the problem, but the person being used is also part of the problem, and it's their kind of realization of, hey, I'm letting this guy use me, you know. So,
but that implies, that implies to me that you are quite aware, though, of. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not that your film is necessarily trying to make a major point, but you are conscious.
Oh yeah, no. With this film, yeah, it's probably one of the first ones where I'm talking about a topic that I'm kind of familiar with, or that I want to explore within that world. So, and it is about showing a character and how to deal with people who are draining you, you know. So in that sense, it's less about the surface level comedy is only going to take you so far in a story like that.
Is that a challenge then, actually, just because obviously you're going to be making that with the film board, because I agree with you, actually, I don't think any topic should be off the table, but it's more how people deal with it and approach. It really depends whether it'll be offensive or not. Like, is that something you had to sell to the film board, though, like, to try and...
No, I mean, to be honest, with this, it wasn't a case of that. That was just the nature of the project. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I put that in there because I thought it would be an easier sell. I mean, to be honest, that was the story I kind of wanted to explore.
And you've had no problems?
No.
No? Cool. Okay, well then let's bring it back onto something slightly more lighthearted. Like, can you guys tell me one film that genuinely scared you? Like, genuinely scared you?
Without mentioning martyrs.
Can I?
Yeah, go on, so we get back in there.
Okay, so I'm going to have to go back to Nightmare on Elm Street, but I have to talk about the first one.
What age were you when you saw it?
I was about 10, and it was on Sky Movies at the time, Sky Premiere, Sky Max or whatever, and I watched it at 3 a.m, snuck into the living room, stuck on Nightmare on Elm Street, and that one scene where Freddy stretches his arms in alleyways, even to this day, when I walk home at night, and I walk through an alleyway, why walk through an alleyway at night, my brain keeps putting the idea of a man stretching his arms down the alleyway, and that just gives me the fucking chills. Like, you know, it's just like these surrealistic things, you know, that just mess with your head. That film really creeped me out and got under my skin. But I know, when you look at it now, it's kind of dated, I know, which is a shame.
I still think it's a great film.
I think it's still scary. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Sure. I remember being when I was a very small child, Twin Peaks was on TV, and we weren't allowed to, it wasn't allowed in our house. And we never really knew why, but we just knew that there was something about it that just sort of reeked of evil. And I saw a bit of it, while my mother was out of the room or something. And there's a scene in it where Grace Zabriskie, the Sarah Palmer character, goes to her daughter's bedroom the morning after her daughter has disappeared, and we all know what happens to her daughter. And she looks around the room, she sees nothing, and she goes downstairs. And then later in the episode, we flash back to that same scene, and it slows, and we see that there is in fact a figure crouched at the end of the bed.
Bob.
Who was actually the carpenter working.
Yeah, he was the set designer or something.
And they just sort of threw him in. But it's the fact that you see it once and then you see it again and you realise that you didn't see it the first time, which is what's so thrilling about it, because we all have that moment. You very rarely see that in horror films, that moment of non-comprehension. Something comes and people shriek in a horror film, but that's not what happens in real life. Something comes and you don't know what it is, and then you shriek.
Yeah.
There's this wonderful scene in Don't Look Now when the little girl is drowned in the pond, and Donald Sutherland is bringing his daughter's body to the house where Julie Christie is coming out of the house, and she sees him carrying the child up, but there's actually quite a long moment between when she sees it and when her brain connects and realizes what it is. And there's this wonderful moment where Julie Christie is looking and she's not knowing what she's seeing. And you see that so seldom, and it's really powerful to see.
I tell you, I think Bob is definitely one of the scariest things. It's obviously his television, but genuinely chilling. But you're right. Sorry, on the jump scare thing. But sorry, the Judy in Don't Look Now taking a moment to kind of realize the horror. It's something I've noticed in even like the earlier slashers, or particularly John Carpenter's earlier work, when you're using jump scares. Jump scares nowadays are just before your brain even has a chance to process what they're seeing. There's such a loud bang that we're going to jump. But in the older films, there was actually always a beat for us to silently see this creature, and then the sound came in. It gave us that extra jolt, but it is that moment of horror of our brain before we actually know what we're seeing that really gets to you.
I mean, well, now it's just ridiculous. I mean, I had to review this movie Rings, which is the...
Oh, I haven't seen the latest Ring.
I actually walked out.
But there's a scene in it where somebody opens an umbrella and the center goes boom. It's just open, it's just raining. It's not that terrifying. But you see it very seldom now, an effective scare. The only one that I can really recall recently was the film called Personal Shopper. I don't know if people...
Oh, Kristen Stewart. I missed it actually, but I heard it was very good.
Olivia Assayas film. It's a ghost story, but and I don't want to ruin it, but there's quite a lengthy sequence involving text messages, and I don't know, it's just because I have a particular history of sort of waiting for text messages or something, but there's this terrific extended scene, and it runs about 25 minutes, where she's receiving text messages, and then she goes on the Eurostar and of course can't get them, and then emerges from the Eurostar and gets them in a row, and it's incredibly thrilling, and what eventually happens at the end of the scene is incredibly
I'll have to check that
terrifying out. In a really strange way, because it's just a phone.
Yeah.
But it's
well, in the same way in Twin Peaks, it was just a man crouched behind a bed, and yet devastating.
But the ordinary thing in the wrong place is so frightening.
Connor?
I remember that Bob moment as well.
Yeah.
Like, I watched Twin Peaks just by accident one evening, and I do remember that as quite a terrifying moment. I think the film for me that I actually haven't been able to watch it on my own, or it's The Exorcist basically, but it was one of those films where I don't like things about the devil and possession.
Why?
I think because it gets into my head. It's the one film, like I don't mind like anybody in a mask running around, but for some reason, like the Innocents as well I remember watching that one night. Anything a bit supernatural gets sort of into my head. And it's the one film, I mean, I love it. Like, I've seen The Exorcist loads of times. I think it's a great film. But it's the one film I kind of, if I'm on my own and I was going to put on a horror film, I hesitate before I put on The Exorcist. Because I know it puts me in a certain kind of mood where I'm kind of creeped. And even I think I was watching Paranormal Activity 3 or 2 or something, and I was watching that on my own on my laptop. And it really, like...
I think 3's really good. Actually.
Yeah.
3's genuinely scary.
It scared me,
The
like,
witch
you know?
at the end,
Yeah.
this is creepy.
No, it's
And the other thing that terrified me, which is not a horror film at all, but the last one that scared, it's probably silly, but the remake of The Jungle Book. The tiger is terrifying.
I didn't understand why Shere Khan had become an East End villain in the Jungle Book. Actually, it seemed to like film it.
It's scary, man.
But there's actually something that I just remembered. So a recent film that I think didn't get a lot of the attention that it deserves is an Australian film called Lake Mungo.
yes. That really got to me actually.
It's a terrifying scene.
It's a mockumentary based, so like it's not like it is sort of found footage, but it's positioned as like a full-on documentary you're watching. So there's interviews with people after the fact, and there's photos presented. And it's about a family who've lost their daughter, right?
Yeah.
And they begin to believe that perhaps she's trying to communicate with them. There's family photos where they see there's sort of a shadow in the background. They think maybe it's her, and it kind of evolves as it goes on. But when I started watching that, for the first 10 minutes or so, I was kind of thinking, I don't think I'm going to get into this. And it's that kind of thing that builds and gets under your skin. And by the end, I was genuinely, I'd say more disturbed than terrified, but I was freaked. You know, I didn't jump or scream, but it bothered me. And I love that, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Australian... I know there's a very rich tradition of horror films in Australia, especially sort of Wolf Creek,
yeah.
that kind of stuff. But there's something about the mystery of the Australian landscape, and there's something about Australia that I just think is freaky.
But is that the question though? Because like that's every country working to their strengths. Because actually, I want to talk a little bit about Irish film now in a moment. But like, is it because it's just foreign to us? Because I sometimes wonder, like, Irish horror films are quite popular abroad, and I think sometimes over here audiences don't necessarily respond because they kind of go, "Sure, that's only the street down the road. That's fine." You know, I know there's no problems there, but when we watch an Asian film, we kind of believe, well, maybe ghosts are real over there, but not here. We watch The Outback, and we're like, that's different. Is it just that it's not what we're used to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I remember going to see the American version of The Grudge, and Sarah Michelle Gellar is being tormented by spirits, and a policeman says to her, well, that just happens in Japan, and we're sort of supposed to accept it. I don't know about that. I mean, I think Australia, as an example, it's that there are places in that country that are wild.
There's loads of crazy animals that can kill you.
Yeah.
And like dangerous spiders and everything.
And it could be prehistory, it could be any time, and we don't have that in
We don't, but we're steeped in superstition and mythology, you know, because I'd be with Conor on the superstition stuff, that supernatural kind of gets me more, I don't know why, than like direct violence. But like we're a country just completely immersed in that.
Like, I'm not religious, but I will say this, I stuck on Sinister 1 and 2, I did double bail in my house on my own, and when the films ended, I had to turn on all the lights in the whole house, because that was just terrifying. Just the idea that this guy could be anywhere, you know, it could, but it's really in your head, and to me that gets under my skin more than, you know, a slasher as well. It's when it plays with your head like that, it just, you get the chills, like, you know.
The kind of snuff movies in the first Sinister really bothered me. They really got to me. Okay, but like, so Irish films, like, is there anything that, like, because Irish horror is actually doing quite well. I'm not sure that everyone in Ireland is always aware of that, but the films tend to do quite well abroad. Is there anything you feel that we're not tapping into, that we're missing a trick on? Say the way the French had their extreme cinema boom, the Asian J-horror kind of thing, Ozploitation in Australia, you know, what should we be focusing on?
Well, I think we've all just done one of different genres in a sense, and there's not enough of each one. Like, for example, I did an action horror movie, and I think it's the only Irish action horror movie made.
I'd say that's probably fair.
And you've made a slasher with Stitches, you made a vampire movie with From the Dark, and...
would you consider that a vampire film?
Technically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you made a supernatural film. So you know, like, I think we just need to make more of these, like, and everything is just like, no, there's one and done so far, like, and we kind of, I think Ireland over the last few years is only starting to get into the horror genre, or starting to push it more, it's starting to come out more, you know, and I think we just need to support it more, like, you know.
Would you think then, like, say, it obviously has been such a massive success at the box office. Don't even know where the figure is now, but I think it's coming up to 500 million or more. Like, it's huge, and this is for an R-rated horror film in America. So I don't think it was 18s here. Was it 15s, 16s?
16s.
But like for like a straight up violent film, which they kind of disappeared for a while there. That's a massive, massive amount of money to be made, and in a way, proves that you don't have to make PG-13 horror, which I think most horror fans have been frustrated by over the last decade or so. Do you think that's going to spill down to us making films? Not that you necessarily have to make a very violent film, but do you think that's going to help when you're trying to sell your next film, that you're going to be able to say, look, people can deal with these darker topics, that we shouldn't be afraid of it, and it's not box office curse?
Well, the first thing I'd say about it, I'm not 100% sure what your question is, but what I will say is the thing about it is probably for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been trying to make an R-rated horror movie with kids, and you've constantly been told you can't make that kind of movie, no one's ever going to see that movie, because the problem is if you've kids as leads, who people always assumed if you've kids as leads in an R-rated film, adults won't go to see it and kids won't go to see it. You know, but I think
Stranger Things.
I think what's changed now is 2 things. One is because of the internet, kids can kind of see whatever they want, and I think also there's this whole nostalgia thing as well, where we're happy to watch a kind of an 80s style Spielberg movie, even if it is a horror movie. So I think that movie has kind of changed the goalposts along with Stranger Things, and it's opened up that idea that it's possible to make or rated horror movies. Like the thing I think is significant with it is that there's kids in that movie. Do you know?
And violent things do happen to those kids.
And that's something you kind of haven't seen before, or I can't think of it.
The Brood.
Kids as leads, or have you?
Doesn't The Devil's Backbone involve a lot of
Yeah.
I mean, I take a rather dim view of it.
I wasn't actually a massive fan person.
Because to my eye, it was a children's film. And the register of the film and the way the story was told, you know, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, it felt like a children's film to me. And the only thing that didn't feel like a children's film was all the cursing. And I can imagine if I'd seen that when I was 10, I would have thought it was the best film ever. But now I've found it a little dull, and it seems to me to be part of this weird infantilizing culture now where, you know, adults, everyone is reading Harry Potter and going to see, you know, children's movies. I don't understand the popularity.
Children at the same time as being horror. I mean, like there's some horrible things happening in the book to the what's the name of the girl character in it again?
Beverly,
yeah. I mean, like, whatever happens in the book is nasty, but in film they tease on it. But like, there is a lot of dark subjects in the film It. However, I would have felt it would have been better had you killed off a few more kids to kind of raise
That
the
would make the
stakes.
sequel real difficult.
I know, but like, kill 2 more off.
Yeah.
But like, no, but that opening scene grabs you alone to say, look, you're in for a ride. You know, that first 5 minutes. But you know, it does. I mean, that film wouldn't have been made if it wasn't for Stranger Things. And now I feel like the studios feel comfortable now that we can explore new avenues in horror. I mean, 500 million on 35 million budget, it just speaks for itself. Like,
Yeah.
And they even reduced that budget because I think Poltergeist came out during the year and the poster was of a clown.
Yeah.
And because it didn't do well, they were like, oh, clown movies don't sell. And they slashed the budget by 10 million or something.
Well, like that, yeah, I think we've all dealt with that in different projects. Okay, well, because we're going to get up to our screening in a few minutes, but then just before I pass, can I just briefly touch on TV horror? Because this is kind of an interesting thing that's happened recently, which initially I was very heavily against, because they were just taking all of my favorite horror films and turning them into TV series, and what works perfectly in 2 hours didn't need 13 hours or 6 or 7 seasons. But I've because I've just started watching The Exorcist, and I'm about 3 episodes in. I'm actually really surprised by it. I actually think it's very well made, and of all the films, I thought that was the worst idea you could ever touch on. What do you guys think? Is there any good TV horror? Can it actually be scary, or is it just an interesting kind of twisted story?
my favorite so far, I'm fucking loving it, is Ash vs. Evil Dead. It's so good. Like, it just continues from after Army of Darkness. And, you got Bruce Campbell cracking those jokes and fighting those demons. And it's just a great companion piece to the Evil Dead trilogy. I'm just like, because like, if you like Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2, it's kind of gone that gory comic booky vibe with it. And they're on season 3 now, but like, yeah, no, that's to me is one of the funnest shows I've seen. And I think what's great about TV, I think Nightmare on Elm Street would make a great series, because if you look at the mythology, the
Have
Dream
you seen
Warrior.
Freddy's Nightmares?
No, forget the Freddy's Nightmares, Tales from the Crypt stuff, but
Yeah.
I mean, like, the ideas, the characters you can explore, you could actually develop Freddy before the things that happen to him. You could explore the Dream Warriors, you could explore all these different things that they only tease. It's very serialized in the film's canon itself. I mean, I think a lot of like Friday the 13th would work better as a series as well. I mean, because they always made lots of sequels and they always expand their mythology. So I think horror genre adapts perfectly for TV. Like, I wasn't personally a huge fan of Scream Show. I didn't like Change the Mask, and I didn't like, I'm not clicked on modern social media as much, Facebook maybe, but like, it's just tuned out, like, but no, but at the same time, I would say, I mean, it's refreshing and it's exciting how edgy TV's getting online streaming. Like, I mean, and like, if you haven't seen Ash vs. Evil Dead, watch it. It's so funny and it's gory and it's mad.
I think that's an endorsement from Zoe.
Yeah.
David.
I think there are some interesting things on TV. I thought that the new series of Twin Peaks actually had interesting things in it.
That was very good.
And some things I wasn't into.
Yeah, I
But,
agree.
I mean, I think the reason that program was banned in our house when I was a child is still holds true. Like, TV has a special power because it's in your home and you bring it into your home, and you usually watch it alone. You don't watch it with other people. You don't section it off the way cinema happens in a safe place. So TV is powerful that way, and yet I kind of feel like this power is sort of on tap. Like, you watch a lot of. I thought The Exorcist was kind of good. I thought Gina Davis was great. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But then you see these you see like American Horror Story and stuff.
Never get into that.
And to me, it's a little bit of horror with loads of kind of prurient sexual stuff.
And Lady Gaga.
Yeah, well, she was pretty horrifying. And to me, it speaks a lot more about the way, American is in the title, so we can assume it's some kind of comment on Americans. And it seems to just say a lot about how Americans have all these weird hang-ups about sex. And so they need to kind of put a little bit of horror and sort of cloak and dagger it into the TV schedules.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of a rambling mess. So, yeah.
So the potential in it, or like?
I think there is potential. I mean, I think that the potential for TV to be a sinister portal into our lives, especially now that I live in the country, so everywhere every house I walk past, people have these massive TVs. Everyone in the country has a massive TV. I thought I would be living with, animals and stuff, but everyone's got a massive TV in the country. And you walk along the street at night, and the blue light is on in every house. And then you go to wherever here, Stoneybat or wherever, and everyone is hunched over their laptop watching. So, it is this little doorway into our homes, and yeah, I think sinister things should come in. More sinister than Stranger Things. I mean, I was so excited about that because I really wanted to see Winona Ryder again and all of this stuff. And again, it was for children. And I want things to be more horrifying. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you actually. Conor?
What's weird is, like, I haven't watched a lot of the horror TV, even though it's on and I should be watching it. Like, I haven't watched Walking Dead, and I think part of my resistance was that all these things that were sort of, you felt like were niche and were your little thing have now become really popular. And like, I'm not watching this now. But actually then when you do watch them, they're really good. I mean, the other thing that's kind of along those lines, which there were 2 horror films that were made for TV. Like, I watched Gerald's Game recently.
Oh yeah, very good.
And Hush, which I thought they were both horror films made directly for Netflix.
Yeah, these are Netflix originals directed by